It's like, it went from like 500, 600, it's like...
Welcome to the new Conservation Center at the MFA Boston. I'm Brett Angell. I'm Senior Exhibitions Preparator here. And we are on the third floor right now. The third and fourth floor are brand new Conservation Center here at the museum. And on this particular floor will be the mount making studio, which we'll enter in a minute. But next door also is the furniture lab and the scientific lab. And on the fourth floor is the paintings and objects conservation. So we're all together now in the same space. And this is the space created by the architects, Sam Anderson Architects, and they're most famously known for the Conservation Center at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City and the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. So we're very fortunate to have been able to secure them for this project. So let's go into the new mount making space. So welcome, we've literally just moved in, so everything you see has been set up anticipating what we're gonna need, but things may get changed as we actually get to work and things might shift around. But I wanna start by saying that it's kind of a nice statement to say that the mount making lab has now been included in the Conservation Center. Normally we've always kind of been off in a corner of the building, and we always do work very closely with the conservators in all our departments. So I think it's a really nice statement to say that it's important to have us here with them. Not only because we work closely with them, because as you all know, mount making is a very critical part of the museum installation process and for the safety of the object. So I think it was a very great signal that we are now included with the new Conservation Center. So as I mentioned, this new project was by Samuel Anderson Architects, and it was my understanding that this was their first time ever making a mount making space. So they've done conservation labs many times, but I believe they said this was the first time that they did a mount making space. So it was a very interesting process to work really closely with them. I've never gotten to do that before from start to finish. So we've had quite a bit of say into this procedure as well as the architects. So it's been kind of a nice marriage. And as you can see, we have one long space. It's a little bit like a submarine, and that's kind of how we're treating it, but we basically have three distinct spaces. The space we're standing in right now is our clean space, which is where we'll have the objects, where we'll do the fitting and things like that, where we store all the objects in these beautiful cabinets. The second room is kind of the heart of the whole space, which is the machine shop, the metalworking shop. We'll go there shortly, and then following that is our brazing area, which is, again, kind of the heart of our process. And then the final room, which is not yet complete, will be the wood shop, the carpentry shop for doing fine woodworking. So it's kind of nice to have all these shops lined up in a row. As you can see, we have beautiful light now. We've never had sunlight like this before. The space we worked in had skylights, so we got a little bit sense of light, but now we can actually see what's happening outside. So this is very strange for us to have such luxury. We're used to kind of being in a makeshift space, so it's been really nice. As you can see, we have a series of tables here. Right now, it's just Kim McParland and myself. We're the two mount makers here. We're a little bit unusual setup here than most of you in that we separate the functions of the small mounts and what we call conservation engineering, so the larger pieces. So in general, Kim and I work on objects up to about 100, 130 pounds, something like that. So more or less tabletop size items. And then anything above that, the conservation engineers do. So there's no welding in this space. That happens in a different part of the building. And there's no rigging in this space. That also happens in a different part of the building. So that may be a little bit different than what many of you are used to. But we've separated up those functions because there are so many mounts that we make here at the smaller scale. I mean, Kim and I literally make hundreds of mounts a year, so it's a pretty substantial amount. So anyway, we have all these tables set up in the clean space. Right now it's just Kim and I, but we have the ability to add more. We often hire a contractor out of Cape Nettic, Maine. Many of you may know him, Garrick Mannanen. We hire him all the time, and in fact, once the space is fully set up and functioning, he will be coming and joining us immediately for our next big project. But we also have this set up so that we can have collections care come in and work with us. So if they're working on a project and they need a clean space and they need tables, they'll be able to come in here and do that. Ideally, we wanted everything on wheels so that the space can be modulated and changed as we needed. It ended up that these tables don't have wheels, but it's okay. We can still just push them together or move them around as needed. So this is the setup for right now. We have 3 large new storage cabinets. I apologize for the background noise, but the carpenters and contractors are still working outside, so you may hear some occasional noise. So this is part of our next project, redoing the ancient wing. This is just a small number. We'll be making over 400 mounts, almost 500 mounts for that project, the renovation of our ancient galleries. Next to that, we have our beautiful orange Lista cabinet, which is where we store many things, all our paints, a lot of our tools and things. Again, in our old space was somewhat small, and while we have more space here, it's still not a huge amount of space. Sorry about that. We also have a new lighting system, and it's so high tech that nobody can figure it out, so the lights just keep turning off even though we're working in here. Anyway, so we store paints, brushes, knives, all the various things we do, tools. And we did that because we don't have a lot of built-in storage space, so we just are cramming as much as we can and being as economical as we can by putting things in cabinets and so forth. So, and we each all have our own toolkits, which is a great thing right now with the COVID virus and all, that we each have our own tools. We were doing that before, so that was not a big change for us in this post-pandemic world. As we move forward, this is our Mockup Walls. It's much nicer than we normally have. In our old space, we basically just had old pieces of plywood and MDO that we would just screw on the wall, and as you can imagine, after a few months it looks like Swiss cheese. And then we would just go down to the carpenter shop and get more scrap wood, take the old ones off and put them on. The architects put these nice beautiful wood ones, but within a few months this will all be like Swiss cheese as we drill into the wall and test and fit our mounts. We also like to use these little portable mock-up boards in all various sizes. We have larger ones, smaller ones, but in general, this is how we work. We, of course, like to mock everything up in the space, make sure everything works perfectly, because even the most beautifully designed mount, if it's never tested, may have some hidden flaw or some hidden problem that you can't imagine until you test it out on your mock-up board. So we're very big on mocking everything up, testing it out multiple times, fitting things, making sure everything works perfectly. As we move through the space, all our hardware are on these big rolling carts now. We used to have them in built-in shelving in our old space, but again, to save space, and we didn't have a lot of built-ins here, we decided to just get one of these big rolling carts. And so all the wood screws, all the machine screws, all the various hardware are on both sides of this cart, and so now we can just move it around in the space wherever we needed to. We could even move it into the galleries if we needed to also during an installation. But so this is, again, a little bit of learning curve for us, like trying to figure out how things will work best, what's going to work well, where, and so again, this is our starting point. It may change. Normally, all these doors would be closed. We worked closely with the architects. We wanted swinging doors, almost like restaurant style, with windows, because we go back and forth through these spaces hundreds of times a day if you're busy working on mounts. So they actually provided us with that. At the moment, we have them propped open just so that we can smoothly move between the spaces, but normally these would all be closed between the brazing area and between the shop and the clean area. So this is the heart of our mount making space. This is the machine shop. We've got a few new tools since last time, but not new is the spray booth. It's just getting reset up, and Kim is in the process of putting booth coat in it, which is the white material you see being painted on there. We like to use booth coat because it makes it easier to clean the booth every week, to vacuum it out. And then after a year or so, once it gets really dingy, it's a water-based material. You can just take basically like a palette knife or spatula and scrape it off and repaint it again. So we like to keep a very clean spray booth. In the middle is our vice table with all our various vices. We've got a 90-degree bender, we've got a small anvil, we've got some of our tools underneath. We wanted it to be accessible from all four sides so that we can kind of rotate all around. I should mention that we have high volume here, so you're going to see doubles on a lot of the tools. Like we have two We have 2 floor standing belt sanders. We have 2 tabletop belt sanders. We have 2 grinders. We have 2 of almost everything because we have such high production that we don't have to stand around and wait for someone to finish using a tool. So this way we can just keep moving forward with our mount making. It may be a little different than most museums. We have a really ambitious exhibition schedule here, and before the pandemic we also had an ambitious traveling exhibition schedule, so we're just making mounts all day long. We treat it almost like a assembly line factory type process. I mean, of course, we do everything in a safe manner and we work very closely with our conservators, but we really also have to just keep pumping out the product. So it gets a little bit crazy sometimes, but you see doubles of a lot of the tools, so that's what's going on here. So anyway, to our right is our brand new media blaster. We had a much smaller one in our old space, so a lot of our mounts didn't fit in here, but for those of you not familiar, this is how we clean our metal. Most of you probably do use this, but we have a in-house compressed air line that runs this, and it basically shoots out, there's a gun inside there, you wear gloves, and it shoots media onto the metal to get rid of all the scorch marks and to clean the metal before it's primed and painted. And it's a huge, again, time-saving tool. Back in the old days, we used to use pickle, or we used to file and grind things off. Now we just stick it in here and blast it off. It's just a much quicker process for cleaning the metal. Next to that is another fairly new tool. We have a really nice fancy Bali drill press that we got a couple years ago. It works fabulous, fantastic. Next to that is a tool we don't use very often, but is a jet spindle sander. So while we don't use it often, when it is needed, it is just the right tool for the right job, as you probably know. So it's a nice kind of addition to have. We keep various other tools in here. This is our cabinet for all our primers and spray cans. We paint most of our mounts either with airbrush, air gun in the booth, or we use acrylics, paint them, and then clear coat them. So we'll kind of span both worlds with how we paint all our mounts. The spray booth and the air guns are better if you have high volume, if you have a lot of the same thing, a lot of the same color. But generally we're just doing one-off mounts, so generally we'll just prime it and then paint it with the acrylics and then clear coat it and pad it after that. Again, over here we have our 2 floor standing belt sanders, and then we have a bandsaw. Eventually, it's on back order right now, but we're getting a Bali vertical mill that's going to go here. It's going to be about the same size as the drill press. We decided not to go with a huge one because we won't use it super often, but when we do use it, again, it's going to be that tool for the right job. I'm anticipating when we're installing in the galleries that we may have something that emergency where we have to machine a specific type of profile or something, and so the vertical mill will be perfect for that when it arrives, so we're looking forward to that. You see up here 2 Nilfisk vacuums. Unfortunately, there was supposed to be a metal extraction system for in here, but that was value engineered out at an early stage, so we don't have that. So we've decided that we're going to just go with Nilfisk. We're going to hook them directly to our belt sanders, and we're going to get the switches that will turn on the vacuum when you turn on the machine. So it'll just be a pretty seamless process. So that's a little bit of an unfortunate result, but you know how it is, money. As we turn around, this is a good portion of our metal storage. We'll show you briefly. We're going to go over to our mount making storage area, mount storage area, and we have backup supplies and metal there as well, but for the most part this is the bulk. For our section, for doing the smaller mounts, we use brass probably 95% of the time, just because it's the easiest material for us to use. Again, we have our spray booth. We have several rolling steel tables. There were a couple in the front that you may have noticed. We have one in here, and again, this is just to create nice flexibility so that we can move things around, and when we have multiple people in here, then we can set up in different areas of the shop and not be in each other's way. And then finally, last piece of equipment in here is our downdraft table. And this is great. We use it as a surface to machine on. It collects all the materials, it collects fumes, it collects all the particles. In here we have a series of trays and metal mesh filters as well as HEPA filters, and that purifies, cleans the air before it comes back out. Again, we have double double belt sanders, we have double grinders, and we have double Fordhams. Again, just to keep the procedure moving along. But the downdraft table is fabulous for just keeping everything clean, getting rid of the particles. And if we turn around for a minute, they've given us additional air purifier as well. That will also help to purify the air in here. So they've really thought about that part of this installation. One other weird thing, if you've noticed the air keg up here, this was recommended by our contractor who does a lot of airbrushing. When you have in-house air, if multiple people are using it at the same time, you may lose pressure. And so the air keg stores the air, and you can keep it at the pressure that you need to run your air gun. And it's critical, obviously, if you're doing a fine paint job on something. You don't want the pressure changing and the amount of paint flow out of the gun changing radically on you while you're doing it. So that's a new tool for us, so we're excited to try it out. So that's the machine shop. Next we'll move into the brazing area. So we have a nice new deep sink that we designed with the architects, and we wanted it super long so that we can get big pieces of metal or whatever it is we need in there. We have a minimal, a little bit of storage, and then we have more storage for metal here, which we're not using at the moment, but we will probably use it in the future. But the most exciting part is that in the brazing area, we now have 2 areas for brazing. In our old space, we only had a section this big, and there would be 3 to 4 of us using it at any one time, so it could get very busy and very hectic. So again, in the interest of keeping the mount making process moving forward and moving smoothly, we're able to double the size and have 2 tables. It's also kind of a nice thing because if you're working on something that has multiples and you have a certain setup that you need on the table, you can just leave that setup and keep working and you won't disrupt the other people. In the old space when we had that, we'd have to kind of work out our schedules so that you could set that up and work, and then the other person would either have to wait to braze or braze around them, or it was a little less convenient. So it's really nice to have 2 setups. And then we essentially just use either small acetylene tanks, and then for larger work, we have oxyacetylene tanks as well. And as you can see, we have the 2 extraction systems, which unfortunately at the moment are not functioning. So while we're all set up and ready to go, we can't actually do any brazing here right now. So our contractors are working on that, and hopefully we'll resolve it soon. And once that is activated, then we'll be up and running. And finally, the last area, which we won't go into because they're not set up yet, but there's also a wood shop, carpentry for doing woodwork in here. And I think it's kind of nice. In the old space, those 2 functions were put together. Not the brazing area wasn't in there, but the metal working machines and the woodworking machines were in the same shop. And obviously that is not ideal. For us, it didn't really matter because wood and wood dust is not going to hurt metal, but all the metal shavings were not ideal for the woodworkers. So it's great that we've been able to separate those shops. So again, we're brand new in this space. We're just about ready to go. We'll see what kind of growing pains there are, but so far we're very excited to be in such a beautiful space. So next we're going to head over to our mount storage. This is our mount storage area at the Museum of Fine Arts, and while you can see the room itself is not very glamorous, and doesn't have any climate really. There's no heat in winter, and there's no air conditioning in summer, so it does get a little toasty in here and a little cold in winter. But it's just for our mounts, so it's not really critical. There's no objects stored in here, and we're actually really thankful to have a space to store our mounts now anyway. Historically, each department stored their own mounts in their area, and I'm sure you can imagine that became a bit of a problem because each department has a different level of attention span, different amount of people, different amount of understanding of how to care for mounts, and so consequently some mounts would get bent, some mounts would get lost, and so it really wasn't working for us. And so when we were given this space as an option, we of course jumped on it, and so now we are able to store the thousands of mounts that we've made in here. And so every mount, we use the TMS, the museum system, which I'm assuming most of you do as well. And so every mount that we have has an ANC, so it can be tracked, its location can be tracked, and then also every mount is attached to the object that it goes with, so it's easy to find. And again, as you can imagine, most objects have multiple mounts, there are many that only have one, but there are some objects that might have 3, 4, even 5 mounts, depending on what was needed for a particular exhibition, what was needed for a particular design. And so this really helps us in the long run, as you can imagine, because we don't have to remake mounts all the time. We're just constantly, we're a very high production museum, at least before the pandemic we were, and so we have lots of traveling exhibitions. We have a very ambitious exhibition schedule at the museum, and so we make several hundred mounts every year. And so by having this system, we're able to really kind of cut down a little bit on that, or at least economize on mounts that we've already made. So as you can see, we've set up pallet racking, and each rack has a shelf number, and this is our location in TMS. So if you're looking up a mount in TMS and it tells you the location, this is what you're looking for. We also have cabinets with the same idea. Cabinets are all shelved, each shelf is numbered so that we can find the mounts. You can see how they're often stored. Oftentimes when we deinstall an exhibition, the mounts just go back together in a block of foam, and then they'll go back into storage this way. And usually that works because in general these objects get displayed together anyway, so it's not such a bad thing that it ends up like this. And then my colleague, Kim McParland, is basically in charge of this. We started setting this up about 10 years ago, and we only had just a couple of pallet racks here, and we thought at that time, oh boy, this is going to be plenty of space. And as the years go on, we just keep adding more and more pallet racking. You can see we've added more wooden shelves, we've added cabinets. I mean, there are literally thousands of mounts here. And so as we go along, Kim has been creating new locations in TMS. She's been setting up the shelves. She's been organizing and reorchestrating all of our mounts. So it's really nice and really critical to have this space. We also use it for some secondary storage because our new space doesn't have as much storage as we would like. We use this room for our backup metal storage, for our materials for making mounts. And then also, again, as I mentioned earlier, we do a lot of traveling exhibitions, and so we keep all our traveling kits here, our traveling tools, drills, etc. And so I'm sure you can see the benefit, but it's very exciting to have these. And again, Kim keeps perfecting this as we go along, so we get better and better as to how to store them and how to track them and keep them safe. And so the latest incarnation is that Kim is now taking all the smaller mounts and organizing them in these Sterilite boxes. And as you can see, we have the information on the outside of the box. We have the ANCs, we have the accession number, so it's really easy to find the mounts. And so it just keeps getting better and better. And again, Kim is doing this in and around all our regular projects, so it's not like she has all the time in the world to do this. So usually it will end up being an hour here or an hour there. But again, it's pretty fabulous to have mount storage. I don't know how many of you out there do. I haven't really discussed it with other colleagues, but it's really critical and we're very excited to have it.
Thank you, Brett. Your shop is gorgeous.
Thank you very much.
I'm super jealous of a number of things that I wrote down, but your mount storage is amazing. I'm sure that we've got some questions from our attendees, and I would like to introduce our Q&A facilitator, Emmy Savacool, who's going to help us get through them.
Hi, Brad. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Brett, can you just talk a little bit about how you got started in mount making? Give us your origin story.
Sure. My origin story is probably not unlike a lot of other people in that before I came to the museum, I didn't even know mount making was, I didn't know there was such a job, didn't know it existed. So I started basically as kind of a generic collections care staff person, which was just moving artwork around, helping with installations where needed, things like that. And my colleague who is on this particular presentation, Karen Gausch, used to be at the Museum of Fine Arts. And I started working with her doing little side projects just because I was interested, and she encouraged that. She was very welcoming to that. And so I'd work on some of my own things. And eventually she got so busy that she really needed help. And so she asked for an assistant position and they granted her that. And so I worked with her for many years as her assistant. And then eventually she moved across the river over to Harvard, and that's where she is now. And so when she left, I was lucky enough to be able to move into her old position.
That's great. Thank you so much for answering that. So we had a couple questions about mount storage. We know it's such a time-consuming task, especially given all those objects you showed us. You must find it useful and time-saving or material-saving in the end to be able to keep all of those extra mounts around. So how much time do you think that does end up saving you to be able to reuse these mounts?
Boy, you know, ironically, we're still just, there's no end of mounts making every single day, whether it's for traveling exhibitions or for rotations in the gallery or for gallery renovations. However, I would say that it probably saves us, if I had to put it into a percentage, it probably saves us about 25% of the time. We can go in and find something that works. As I mentioned in the video, there are many objects that have multiple mounts. Some could have as many as 5 or 6 different mounts. It just depends what that particular exhibition needed for that installation, or if there was some particular part of the object that they wanted to focus on that's different than normal, things like that. So, I mean, the other part that really saves time, and I always give Kim a shout out, Kim McParlin, my colleague, whenever we look up in TMS and we look at the object and we see what mounts are available, and I walk over to mount storage and look, and I always give her a high five when we find the mount. And I would say we have a 99.9% success rate of being able to find the mount according to its location in TMS. So it's helpful in many ways, but I would say maybe it's saved us about 25% of our time to go back into the other projects. So that's pretty substantial.
Okay, this is a favorite question of mine. Favorite tool, if you can pick one.
Well, it's my favorite only because of time consumption. It saves so much time, but it's kind of ugly. It's the media blaster. You know, somebody, I think Marie Latouche asked why, or someone asked why we don't use pickle anymore. And pickle is just so time consuming. It takes forever to work, and the front of your clothes gets all pitted all the time. So all my shirts have little pinholes in them from the splashing of the pickle and everything. And media blaster, I mean, you can literally be done with your mount and just blast it in less than a couple, you know, depending how big it is, like less than a minute or a minute, and get it in the spray booth and prime it. So, well, it's not the most glamorous tool. It's a fantastic time saver, but also our new Bali drill press. Well, it's a couple of years old now, but it's one of our newest tools. That thing is just like a Cadillac. It's so sweet. And there's so many functions on it that we don't even use. It's really made for high production. So if you're cranking out hundreds of pieces, it has a whole coolant system, which we don't use because we're not cranking out thousands of the same piece, but it has that if we ever needed to. So that's a pretty impressive machine as well.
I think we're all taking notes on this one. Future shopping list. We have a question from Aaron O'Malley. Since this is a new space, how was your workflow affected during the planning and the moving process?
Well, that's an excellent question. It's actually been affected in more ways than one. Not only that, but the pandemic affected us at the worst possible time. So we were all packed up, ready to move in our old space. So we packed up, I think we finished on a Thursday. We were supposed to move the next Monday. That Friday, everything shut down for the pandemic. So we were all packed up, ready to move, and then gone for 5 months. So when we came back, it was really hard to get back into that and start. And in fact, we had to do some work. We had to unpack a lot of things in our old space because the new space wasn't still ready. So we did have to do a few small mount things in our old space. And that was really painful to go back in those orange crates and bins and unpack things and like try to find them and get back to work. So that part was really the unexpected fly in the ointment. We had planned pretty well for this move. In fact, our big project that I mentioned in the video was the renovation of the ancient wing, which we are now in the process of working on. So we knew we weren't going to begin that until we were in our new space. So we had kind of planned that ahead of time. So the pandemic was really the big thing that just really messed us up for a while.
It sounds like the new studio is kind of a silver lining though.
I have to say it's pretty sweet to come back after all that time. And the first time, before we even fully set up, but when we were installing our Basquiat exhibition, I had to quick make some little clips and some mounts, and I was up there by myself, and the sunlight was coming in the windows, and I just had to pinch myself. I'm like, wow, I'm like, this is really cool. Like, I'm working in my new space and it's working really well and it's beautiful. And I'm like, I can't believe this is for us.
I think everyone present is incredibly jealous of those windows out of the whole shop.
It's really, I just, again, can't believe that that's for us, because the other space we were in was okay, but it didn't have windows, and it was definitely in a removed part of the building that was very separate from everyone. In fact, some of the staff even had a hard time finding us because we're so kind of pushed off in a corner of the museum. So it's pretty sweet.
Now, is there anything you wish maybe you had done differently in the designing of the space now that you're in it?
Boy, I don't know that we're far enough along to say that yet. The one thing I would say that I mentioned a little bit in the video is that I wish we would have spent more time thinking about built-in storage. In the end, it worked out okay with all our cabinets, and both Kim and I are great at shoving things in little spaces and getting it everywhere, which is why I kind of mentioned the submarine. You know, they put like shoved bread in between the torpedo tubes and cured meats and stuff wherever you could go. Like, that's kind of how we're thinking. But I would have definitely probably wanted to design in more built-in storage. I think that would have helped us a little bit.
Now we have an audience question from Evian Torres. I think I'm saying that correctly. They had a question of how you spray your brass. What do you spray your brass with? Do you prime? Do you powder coat?
We don't powder coat, but we prime everything for sure, even before we paint it. So everything is primed with spray can, like Krylon acrylic. And we use primer first, like you would car primer, so gray, black, white, ruddy brown, whatever. We have all those colors, and then we do the color match after that, and then it's clear coated again with clear acrylic from a spray can, and then it's padded after that. So it's not unlike you would paint a car, but definitely that metal always has to be sealed so that there's no oxidation or interaction with the object.
Are you ever asked to powder coat mounts?
I've never been asked to do that. Obviously, if we did that, we'd have to have that done outside somewhere else. We don't have the ability to do that in our space, but interesting question. No, we've never been asked to do that yet.
Of course, I've jinxed you now, so
right.
The question
next
is coming.
Week. Yeah,
the
next week.
Is coming. So another classic question for you. Favorite object you've gotten to work on?
Oh my gosh.
Again, you don't have to pick just one, but we are limited on time.
I will say that, you know, before I worked at the museum, I was not a big fan of Greek and Roman art. And now having worked there, we have an incredibly amazing collection. And now that I've worked there and our curators are so excited about it and so knowledgeable that you learn so much about it, I love that stuff so much. You know, we installed last 2 years ago in our daily life gallery, we installed a person pooping. I mean, it painted on the side of a pot. I mean, how can you get any better than that? It's like amazing. So it would be super hard to pick a specific object, but I've really fallen in love with our ancient Greek and Roman objects. It's just, there's so many stories behind them, and our curators are always like so excited to talk about it. They always get to learn these great things about them. But we work on everything from, you know, 3,000 plus year old Egyptian artifacts or ancient Nubia to contemporary objects to paintings. We work on everything. So it's really, the variety is probably what's the most fun part.
Were there any favorite solutions you came up with, or any particular objects that were very challenging for you?
One super challenging one that I always think about is there's European porcelain object called a sweetmeat set. So it's little dishes that you would put on your table that make up like a big circle. So there's maybe like 12 or 15 pieces. And the curator, it's meant to be on a table and you put things in there, so to eat. And the curator wanted it to be vertical on the wall. So to make this crazy kind of background structure to hold all the pieces, so there's like basically like a center medallion with all these arms coming out of it. I had to make those slightly adjustable so that you can have room to tweak things once you put the objects in. And then each of the 15 pieces has their own little mount that's attached to that armature. So that mount was just crazy and took forever to make, but it's up in the gallery and it looks great. And the curators were happy, and it has that adjustability. So it was worth the extra time to do all those things. But that's probably one of the most like crazy fun mounts I've had to come up with.
Pam Gable has a question about your paints, whether or not they've been Audi tested. Do you take that into consideration?
Everything's been Audi tested. And in fact, we often test things every couple of years because, as you know, the recipes change. And so, you know, when padding or backings for padding, adhesives, things like that change, we have them tested. Epoxies we have tested every couple of years because they change their recipes and you just never know. And for the most part, the paint for the paints, the part that is closest to the object are the acrylics and the golden acrylics. That's the brand we use. So that's all safe. But we have our, as I said, in the next room over, we have our scientific department. And we have a pretty stringent Audi testing program. And so all these things get tested on a pretty regular basis.
So this is an in-house Audi testing. You can just run over, say,
yep.
hey, I'm
Yep.
sure I mean, I got on today.
It's not to say I don't have to get in line between other colleagues, but at least I don't have to get in line behind like 500 other people. We're only talking maybe 20 people that I have to get in line behind. So I'll take those odds.
Well, Laura had a question for you specifically. Best pizza in Boston.
Oh my God. Well, in my own town where I live in Chelsea, which is just across the water from Boston. Chow Pizza and Pasta. It's getting raves. Everyone's coming in from Boston to eat there. It's just 2 blocks from my house here. And I'm not lying. It's incredible. It's like my favorite pizza. Probably not what people think they're going to hear with the North End being so close, but ooh, Chow Pasta and Pizza, fantastic. Highly recommended. We get it at least once a week or every other week for our dinner. So it's fabulous.
I'm a New Jersey native, or born anyway. So that was a bit of a loaded question, but I'm going to trust you on this one for my next visit.
Yeah, it's good.
Now, how has COVID affected your workload? I know you said you were out for 5 months. Now that you've been back,
it's affected mostly how we work. Unfortunately now, or fortunately, however you want to look at it, now that we've been back since August, you'd never know that we were gone for 5 months. The workload has just risen right back up to where it was before. The amount of kind of stress and pressure has risen right back up to where it was before. And while I complain about those things, I'm obviously extremely thankful and grateful to have my job back and to be so busy that we have this much work. But it's mostly affected how we work. So we have an electronic system that you go on your phone every morning before you come in and you have to answer all the questions. And if you have a green screen, then you're good to go. You have to show that to the guards as you come in the building. We have separate entrances and exits for the staff. And this is separate from the public entrance. So we're not crossing through each other. We at our museum have to wear the face mask all the time. Even if you're sitting at your desk, you still have to wear your mask. The only time we're allowed to take it off is to eat our lunch, or if you need to go outside for a mask break. Just wash our hands like crazy. Anytime I leave our space and come back in, I wash my hands. Just little kind of the things the CDC are telling you. So it's more just how we move around the building and the process of getting in and out of the building that have changed. The workflow itself has kind of gone right back to how it was before. Our administration and our exhibitions team, of course, is understanding that things take a little bit longer now because you have all these extra steps, and so that is being factored in as well. And so it's great to have that understanding.
Looks like that's all we have the time for, Brett. So I want to thank you so much for your time, for that wonderful tour.
Thank you, everybody.
Kick it back to Laura.